Good morning. This is Denise Broom in the Engineering CAD Systems office, and I'd like to welcome you to this week's webinar. This week we are finishing up a three-part series for the FDOT menus, and this week we are going to be talking about the Actions menu. I know we've covered and said this, but basically there's a lot of resources that are available in our FDOT menus, and we just wanted to bring it out to everyone's attention through these webinars, and hopefully it helps to save you guys some time. The Actions menu is also available in all our workspaces, so it doesn't matter if you're in structures or roadway or right-of-way, whichever workspace that you're in. The standard cell apps, actions, and design apps are all available in all of our workspaces. The first item on the Actions menu is the Create File project. This particular tool is very useful. Hopefully everyone uses it. You can use it to create your project. There's easier ways to do it. I think I like using MicroStation myself. But you can also use that to create your new files so that you make sure that you're using the correct seed files that we have available and set up for you, as well as having the correct file name. The correct file names are very important because our QC software keys off of those file names. So having the correct one for the discipline that you're working in is pretty critical. I'm going to go ahead and open up MicroStation real quick and just show you some of the things in the tool. So if I go to Actions, Create File Project, within this tool, the first thing that I need to do is create the project, and I only want to select, I would hit Project Settings to set the active project, and I only want to go to the root of my project directory. So if I browsed out, I could see all of the projects in here and which one do I want. So for this one, let's just say I'm going to use this file directory. I got to make sure I get all the way down to it, and then select it, tell it OK, and then tell it OK again. And you'll notice that it's going to ask you again for this information automatically because we're in the SS4 workspace. It's already filled in the workspace for me. The next thing that I need to do is open the control file. So we have geotechnical, mechanical, electrical, roadway, right-of-way, and structures. So if I go into roadway, then I select the file group. There's a lot of disciplines within the quote-unquote roadway workspace. I've got construction files, drainage, EMO. You can see the list. There's a lot of different disciplines in here. I'm going to go to the roadway design files, and I have all the different files that I would need for my project are listed in the file type. So let's just say, let me grab one. Let's see, just another design file. So I could go down to proposed design. There is already a DSG and RDO1, the file that I'm in. It looks for the file in your directory, and it will go ahead and give it another number, increment that number. The output folder, it knows which folder to put it in. If for some reason you needed to change that output folder, for example, if I was in roadway doing a roadway set of plans and I had some minor drainage, I could go in here and change this. I could go to the drainage files. Say I wanted the drainage structures file. So I needed to put that, and I could take and place that within my roadway directory because I've got very minor drainage. I could browse out and tell it to place it in the roadway directory instead. So that is available option. It sets my seed file. You could change that if need be, not that I would recommend that one. It tells you where the seed is located at, and it also has an action down here. In the action section, it tells you when you open the file, not just create it, but you actually open it with this tool, it tells you what is the key-in that is going to kick off when I open the file. nearly every one of our files opens up with set plot scale. Another example, let me flip back to roadway and the alignment file. So when I open up the alignment file, notice it sets the plot scale, but it also has, if I scroll across here, you'll see it's creating models for me. So there's a model in here that it creates for every common scale that we would use in our projects. And it goes ahead and creates all of those models for us with the proper model names with all the scales. So I would tell it to create the file and then open the file. And give it a second to switch between files here. Okay, so if I open up my models dialog, you'll see that it created all of these different models. And it sets the active model to the 50 scale, which is the most common scale that we use. So that's about it with this tool. It's not real complicated, and that's the basics of what you really need to do with this tool. This option up here, I didn't click on this. For consultants, this is the icon that you're going to see. If I click on this, it switches between basically creating the files directly under your C drive or wherever your projects directory is located at. But if I click on that icon, which it doesn't do anything because I don't have TIMs, for DOT designers in-house, this goes to another mode of the tool, and it creates the files within the TIMs environment so that they're already out there on that server for backup. Next on the list is the Set Geographic Coordinate System option. This option, basically it opens up this map in the CADD Pilot browser, and it has the map of Florida with the state plains as well as the UTM zones on the map, and it also shows by color in here all of the different districts. And basically all I need to do is click on the project location. So in the project that I opened up, it's down here in Wakulla County. I could go in here and just click, and it sets the coordinate system to the correct coordinate system for my project location. So for this project, what I would do is I would go in and I would say, okay, set my coordinate system. It opens up the map. I would click in Wakulla County, and then it pops up the geographic coordinate system, and then if there was any other things that I needed to do with that dialog, I could then do so. And there's a, if you want more information about this dialog right here, we have a webinar out there somewhere posted that you can access. Jimmy did a webinar on this tool. That's available as a resource, but I'm not going to get into all of the parts and pieces for this tool today. Set plot scale, I think most everyone is aware of this tool for sure. When you open up your files through the Create Edit program, this dialog will pop up and you can set the scale to whatever scale that you want. I believe by default it pops up as 50. The units you would need to set, obviously they're English, and most of the time that's all we do. File by file, we'll go ahead and set the units. If for some reason you had a list of files that you needed to process, you would click on this process file list, okay, and it will do all the models in a single design file, and then you would just type in the design file name within this list. You can also use wildcards. This image that I've included on this slide is basically from our help file. But basically all you need to do is but you have to know the file names that you need in your list, because you basically type in all of the files that you need it to process. You can use the asterisk as a wildcard, tell it OK. and it's either going to set it for the single file, or it's going to set it for all the models or the whole list of files that you indicate within this file list option. If I went Actions, Set Plot Scale, it brings this dialog up. Set it to 50, set the units to English. If I needed to process the list, you'll see it unghosts, and then I could say, you know, like all of my plan RD files, and put an asterisk for all of the numbers, and then .dgn, and then it would process all of those plan files, plan sheet files, and set the plot scale to 50 for all of them. But I'm going to cancel that so that it doesn't actually do that for us. This is a new feature in SS4. We've added two options on here: turn level filters on and turn level filters off. And those two, by clicking on either option, it turns the standard level filters that I know everyone just absolutely loves, and it turns those level filters on and off. So you don't have to worry about having to get out there on the server or and set the configuration variable so that it turns those filters off. By default, when you install our software, the filters are turned on, so that when you use our workspace, the levels in that, depending on it keys off of the design file name, and then it sets a filter for all of the levels so that only the levels that are available to me, that are in the rule file, that are correct to use in that file, get listed. So in this case, if I hover over this, you'll see that my active level filter is standards and then .algnrd, because that's the file that I'm in. So if I look at the list in here, I don't have a huge list, but you can see that everything in here is mostly it's text. It's all my drafting type items. There's some miscellaneous levels. So most of this in here, it says drafting items that I could then use within this file, along with the scale, the north arrow, as well as my center line and baseline levels, and then my station tick marks, of course, are in here as well. Okay, so if I wanted to see another level, it doesn't pop up in my list. So a lot of times what most of us probably do is go up here to standard and click none. Okay, and then I get everything, and you see my list is much, much bigger. That's typically what we do, because sometimes we don't know what levels that we want to use in a file. This level filter affects not just this list, but it also affects my references. So if I'm in a design file and I'm looking at want to see something in my topo file, and I go over here to my level display and my topo file was here, then I wouldn't be able to see all the levels in my topo file because they're turned off through that filter. So sometimes it's just a little bit of a hassle, I'll say that. So we've gone to the Actions menu and we've added these two options in here to turn the level filters on and off as needed to make that easier for you guys. Because the other thing is, a lot of times this option up here is turned off. You don't see this by default when you get into MicroStation either. A lot of times I wind up having to come in here, right click, and then turn on the level filter option so that I can see that, and then turn it off. Just so that you know, on the FDOT Plans Development menu, we also have these two options over here in our task menu as well. So that should help quite a bit, saving you time to be able to turn those filters on and off very quickly. The Adhoc Manager. This is the option for the FDOT Adhoc Manager. It was developed several years ago so that designers that didn't have access to Geopack, because this is considered one of the advanced tools, so we had, and they've given it different names. But basically, it's the old slimmed down version of Geopack that you couldn't do cross sections, but you did have access to some basic Geopack tools that you could draft with, and it came with the MicroStation license. There was a need to get these Adhocs, being able to modify them and correct them or add them onto our elements was something that was needed, and for those users we had this tool developed. Personally, that's kind of not anymore. You're using Power Geopack or Suite, and you get everything, and they don't have that slimmed down version available. So it's kind of a personal preference if you use this tool or if you use the Geopack tool. It's very similar to the 3PC Adhoc Attribute Manager, but this one's a little bit different. So let me bring this tool up, close the other one down. So basically, let me draw just a line out here in the file. And I don't even care what level it's on. Okay, so I have this line sitting out here. I would select the item to be modified, and I double clicked it, and then it will tell me to use the selection set. So I can do one element or 50 elements, it doesn't matter, however many I have in the selection set, and then it will modify that, whether it's to add new, copy, delete Adhocs, edit the Adhocs, etc. So I would tell it yes, and it tells me whether or not I have Adhoc attributes. I tell it okay. And this one didn't have any, so there's nothing here. So I want to add a new Adhoc. So I'm going to give it a name, and I need to give it a type. So these are the basic types that we have within Geopack. So I have a string, which is a alpha character, and it gets treated, whether it's numbers or not, it gets treated as letters. I have numeric, so those need to be numbers. Quantity is used when quantifying items, elements with the DNC Manager. Quantity actually sets the quantity type or the quantity amount. Remarks is an Adhoc that is there for exactly that, placing remarks or notes or any kind of information that you need to on an element. And unit works with quantity, so if this line was, the face of curb, then I could tell it the quantity, which it would measure, so I could leave that one blank, but the unit I would put in there as linear foot. So I can see this more with like walls, where I know it's going to be, say, cubic yards of concrete for the particular wall. I can't get that cubic yard off of a line, so I would go in and put the quantity in there. So in this case, I'm just going to make it a string. I'm going to give it a value, and tell it to save. Now it's in the dialog, but until I say set, nothing's happened with this element, so I have to hit set. I can append it, and append simply adds the Adhoc to the list, and it does not affect any of the other Adhocs that may be on that particular element. Or I can tell it to replace, and replace would take and update that value for that Adhoc that's on that particular element. So in this case, it doesn't really matter because there's no Adhocs there, and I'm just going to say set. Okay. So if I wanted to then check this, let me go out here, unselect it, and let me select it, select items to modify. It says I have one. Say yes, it says it's with an Adhoc, so then I can double check and make sure that the Adhoc that I applied is there. If I needed to modify this, I would hit the edit button, and I would modify it, click save, and again I need to, and in this case, since that Adhoc does exist, I need to change it to replace, and then click set. and it says the save changes to however many elements that I have in my selection set. So I tell it OK. Next, I'm going to put another line in the file and show how this works. Okay, let me deselect my element. So I have an ad hoc on this line, and I want to copy that ad hoc and the ad hoc values on this line over to this line that I just drew. Okay, I need to first go in and select the ad hoc, or I need to select the line that I want to modify. So I'm copying it to here. So that's the line to modify. So I'm going to select that, and it's going to tell me, do I want to use that? I'm going to say yes, and it'll say OK. And notice that I now don't have any ad hocs. The next thing I want to do is hit copy. Select the ad hoc, select the element with the ad hocs I want. So I'm going to select that particular line, accept it, and notice that it put the ad hoc that was on this line into my box. I can edit this from here, and so let's take that information back off, save it, and then set this to my other line. Okay, so now it should be saved. So if I hit clear, it clears my box. I can then select this element, get it into the box, and double check it, and clear that, and select the other line. Oops. And say yes. And this is the modified version of that I copied and set onto this other one. This is really a personal preference with this tool. It's available. For some people, this tool makes more sense and it's user-friendly for them. For me, I personally still use the Geopack one. For me, that makes more sense. But the tool is available, so play with it, see if you like it. And, like I said, either tool works, and you can edit, delete, modify any of your ad hocs that you have out on your lines. It's just another tool that is available to you. The other option that I can do is delete, so I'm going to hit OK, set that, and now that ad hoc will be removed from that element. And it did. It's without ad hocs. One question, is it possible to have the level filter off as the default? Yes, you can. It's a configuration variable within our workspace, and you would need to go in. You can get the configuration variable by emailing us, and Brad has it in the answers if you look in your questions out there. But basically, you would change that variable from 1 to 0, and it would not load the filters. Another question, ad hocs are only used for cross sections? No, definitely not. Yes, the ad hocs that are needed for the criteria do still exist out there in the DNC Manager, and they're set up, but there's also a lot of ad hocs that are out there for quantities as well as some other things, but most commonly is for quantities and pay items. Thicknesses on asphalt. I have got ad hocs out there set up, like example, the crash cushions. You can set all of the options that are within that summary box. So it's got like the design speed, whether it's a TL2 or a TL3, etc. You can set all of that as ad hocs on your crash cushion when you place it in the file. And then when you automate that summary box, it fills the entire summary box in for you. You don't have to go back to each one and fill that out by hand. So there's a lot of different uses for the ad hoc attributes, and like I said, this is one tool that is available out there for you to make changes to those ad hocs that are out there in your files. By the way, whether you're using, as far as ad hoc goes, you don't have to use a DNC Manager in order to get ad hocs applied to your elements. these ad hocs, there's a lot of our features that are set up so that it uses what they call the native style. And the native style basically means it's going back to our DNC manager in order to set the symbology. And part of what it is setting as well is the ad hocs. If you use the civil features, though, you don't have the option like you do with the DNC to modify those ad hocs. So you would need to go in and edit them from the default if the default is not what you need. That being said, this, like I said, this is another tool for you to use. There is this tool as well as the Geopack. If you go to Geopack Road and then 3PC Ad Hoc Attribute Manager, both of these tools in different ways, but both of these tools do basically the same thing for us with the ad hocs. Okay, next option is Sheets. And Sheets has another drop-down list, actually has a couple in here. When I select Sheets, it gives me first this drop-down, and I'm drainage map notes. This opens the old application, VBA application, to place notes in my file. I'm looking at updating this because it's a little outdated. You really should be using Link Data Manager instead of this particular tool, but it's still out there for those drainage map notes. Plan sheet places the plan sheet in the file using the active scale. Most of the time, by default, it tends to get set to 1, unless you start playing around with a bunch of these other options and you use one that sets the active scale to your plot scale. And that shouldn't be 0, that should have been 1, or it's actually the active scale. Your typical section sheets, which are the proposed roadway typical, structure typical, and then we have the data sheet. And then a lot of times we take our typical section, and that's what goes into, sometimes, the public presentation sheet, which is a much larger border. These options activate the place cell command as well to place the cell within the file, and then it uses, again, the active scale in order to place the cell into your file. So these, you can manually go in, select them, and place borders, sheet borders within your file. The key sheets option, and I'm going to go through all these slides, then I'll go in and I'll actually demonstrate some of these in a few minutes. When I go to key sheets and that option, I get a further pull down list within the menu, and I have the key sheets with map, and this opens our key map sheet clipping tool. Make sure that depending on what discipline you need, I think 9 times out of 10 it's roadway, whatever the lead component is. So if I don't have a roadway component, it might be signing and pavement markings or signals or structures. It might be something else. I would make sure that I put in the discipline that I need. I can click here to new, and that's actually going to go out there, grab the right seed file, and create the key sheet file that I need in the correct directory, as long as I select the right discipline under the type here. I would go out, browse to the county map. It clips it gives me a clip area based on the scale that I select up here, and when I define clip area, it goes out to that map, allows me to select the area that I want to clip, and then once I have set that, then I clip the key map, and it will create my key sheet. And at 1 to 2, 1 inch equals 2 miles, it would give me, actually, that should be 10,560. But based on my scale, it will place the key sheet cell in the file for me, as well as reference that map into the file in the correct location. And from there, I just need to add the additional things like notes, etc. My township range, my begin end project, engineer, etc. So, but this is a really good tool to use in order to quickly create your key sheet. The other options that I have on the list, all of these are the different component key sheets that we have available. It's actually not all of them. ITS, lighting, signals, signing, and pavement marking. It gives me the option to, with or without federal funding, I can go and create them, I don't need a map on the non-lead components within my plan set, but I do need the key sheet. So this just places the key sheet cell within my file. I would need to make sure to create the key sheet file first and then place my key sheet borders as needed within that file. It will automatically place that cell at 10,000, 10,000 as the origin point at the scale of 5280. That I know it does. This sheet, the other tool places it at the scale depending on what my referenced map border is, that scale. And the last pull down that they have is under the profiles. The first option up here does not place a sheet. This brings up the label Profiles VBA. This is a pretty old VBA. It's been around for a while, but not everybody knows it's available. It brings up this application that you see on the screen, and it basically, I identify my profile cell, and then I can tell it to label any station equations that I may have in my alignment along the profile. It also goes in summit points, and these are basically my VPIs, my high points and low points within my profile, and I can tell it to label the station and elevation, give it prefixes, and then hit apply, and it labels out, puts all those labels out there within the file for me. The remaining options are all profile sheets, plan and profile as well as profile, and the different options that I have. The basic difference between standard and optional is the grid is a little bit different in the two. The standard is there's 5 blocks to the major grid lines, and there's 4 minor lines, but so I'd wind up with 5 blocks in between each major grid line every inch. The optional has a different scale to those blocks. There's only 4 blocks per inch, and it is set up so that it has a major grid line every ½ an inch. And I'll show that to you in just a minute. So these are all of the sheets options that are available. So let's go into MicroStation. Let's take a look at some of these things. So if I go to Actions, I would go to Sheets. Like I said, this is an old tool. It's available. I can just tell it OK, and basically it brings up this old text file, which in LDM I've gone through, and anything that you need is already either in a template or I have the note available. But this is still out there and available to use if you wanted to. Actions, Sheets, Key Sheets. So I have Key Sheet with Map, and what it's doing right now is it's going out and looking for that key map file. So I would tell it which discipline I'm working in. So let's say roadway, whether or not it has federal funding. I can click that on, say it's 2 inches. I can browse out and tell it if I want it to create a new file. It's going to create, there's already a 01 file, so it's going to create an 02. I can save that, and that just created my file for me. And then I can browse out to, I don't remember where the map is. Wakulla, grab the DGN file. It's set my scale down here for my clip area, so I would tell it to find the clip area. It flips over into the map. See, it puts a box on my cursor. I would give it, if I remember right, I think it's right in here somewhere. You select just data point in the file, and if you didn't like where that was at and you go, oh, that's not quite it, I can hit define clip area, redefine it, set the clip, and then clip the key map. And that fast I have a key sheet. And then Sheet Navigator kicks off so that you can start labeling the sheet. And then it's a matter of filling in extra data fields and placing the labels, component list, etc., onto this into this cell. Okay, so that's that option. If I go to Actions, Sheets, I've got all my other key sheets. So basically what that did is it created at 10,000, 10,000, it went in and it created that border for me without the map, and then again label my project location, fill out the data fields, and I'm done. If I go to Actions, Sheets, Plan Sheet, hopefully everybody knows how to do this one and is familiar. The last action that I took set my plot scale to 5280, so it's using my active scale, and I would need to go in there. Just pay attention to what the scale is when you bring it in. Sometimes it might be 1, sometimes it might be 50, sometimes it might be, it just depends on what your active scale is set to, but that's what it will set it to. And then the last thing that I wanted to show you with the sheets, well, there's two things, is I wanted to show you the difference between the standard. Let me just place these side by side so you can see it. And this is preference. I think some districts prefer one over the other. Let's zoom in. So you can see in this one I have major grid lines every inch on my sheet. This one has them basically every half inch, and the grids are at a different scale in here than the standard. So this one is standard and this one is optional. And again, like I said, that's a personal preference with the district as to, or the engineer as to which one you would use. The other thing I wanted to show you really fast, and again, this is a really easy tool to use. Let me open up a profile file. So I'd go to Actions, Sheets, Plan Profile Sheets, Label Profiles. It brings up this VBA. Basically, I identify my profile cell, and it sets the information from the cell, tell it to label any station equations. I can tell it to put the back in the head or not, include the regions in the labels. I can also tell it to label the station and elevations. I hit apply, and if I zoom in, you'll see that it put that information in. Basically, it added this information right here. Let's try undo. Did I already have it in the file? I think I did. I was playing with this tool last night. Because there's a VPI here and a VPI here. Let me hit apply again. Yep. See how it places that information into the file for me. Sheet Navigator. This is a very common, very useful tool. I unfortunately don't have time to get into it, but we do have webinars available for you to use that go into not just labeling sheet by sheet. You can go in and use the multi-edit function and the renumbering function in order to, I could renumber sheets, I could go in and put the road number or the digital signature note onto all of the sheets that I have in my index. It indexes my files. It takes the information. I can set the print style here, and then once I've created my index, create a pset to use print organizer. If you do use that option, I recommend that you do set the print style for all of your sheets before you create the print set. When you get into print organizer, if that's not been set and you're looking at files like a cross-section file that has, you know, multiple sheets in it, sometimes it's personal preference whether you have one sheet per file with your plan sheets or multiple. But if I get into a file that has multiple sheets and I try to reset the print style within print organizer, there is it's kind of a bug where it will print the same sheet, say I have 10 sheets in my cross-section file, it'll find the first one and then print it 10 times. Instead of printing each sheet individually, it prints just the first one. If that has ever happened to you and you got frustrated and didn't know how to fix it, go back into Sheet Navigator, attach the print style, set this print style here, and then recreate that piece set, and that should fix it. RfClip, yes, it still exists. This is a very old FDOT tool that was used prior to Geopack coming out with their plan and profile sheet composition tool. We've tried to remove this tool many times because it is a very old tool and it's written with old code, and someone usually screams and it gets put back on. So it's still here, but know that it will eventually be retired, most likely when we move to Connect, when everything plans production wise is pretty much going to change. This tool should be retired at that time. The next few options that are in the actions menu are related to your quantities. There's a little line, it sections them together. The first one is label shapes with ID. This is a pretty basic little VBA that's out there available to you. You can access this tool through the actions menu as well as from the quantities task menu. It basically, you can select everything in a file, and anything that is a shape, it will label it with the MicroStation element ID and label it as area ID, whatever that number is. Pretty basic. Set this up. I do recommend that when you use this tool to make the text not huge, but make it a little bit larger than the standard 0.07. These labels are not for plans production. They're not going in the plans, but they are being delivered to construction and the contractor. So it just, making them a little bit larger makes it a little bit easier for them to locate the shapes within the file if there is a need to get into that file and go through those shapes. The area ID is required on all quantity shapes that we develop in the QTD SRD file. And like I said, it's really easy because once I've created all my shapes in a model, I select everything in the model, and it doesn't label linear elements or arcs or anything like that. It only labels the shapes, and it'll go through and label everything for me in a few seconds, and I can move on to the next pay item. So it's pretty easy. Next one is Link Data Manager. Again, this is a tool that I promise you there are at least a dozen webinars sitting out on our posted webinar site, so I'm not going to take a lot of time on this one. But Link Data Manager is the application that is part of our recommended workflow for quantity documentation for the plans. It is used to link the template Excel files for our plan summary boxes that are required in the plans. Very useful tool. It doesn't have to be DOT templates that you use with this tool. It can link Word documents, TXT text files, as well as Excel files and CSV files. Any of those file types that I have out there and I need to get the data into MicroStation, I can format those files and then bring that information into Link Data Manager, into MicroStation, and then it's very, very easy to manipulate and modify the formatting, the information and the data that's within those source files, and then update it. It's just a right click and update to get that information updated within my MicroStation files. Trnsport gives me another list of options when I select it. Again, these are useful options that are available for you in the quantity workflow. The AECITEM.xml download opens up and it's basically a link to the FDOT FTP site where the AECITEM.xml file has been downloaded from project pre-construction, or that's the new term for transport. When that file gets downloaded out there onto our FTP site, we use that AECITEM file by Quantity Manager when we're manually adding pay items into our Quantity Manager database. That's a really useful link if you're using Quantity Manager for your pay items, things like mobilization or business signs or something that you may not typically quantify, like earthwork. You don't use DNC Manager and can't automatically import that information into your Quantity Manager database, then you go in and can create manually the pay items along with the quantities so that then it can be transferred and are exported out and loaded into Trnsport. Designer interface, that's a link to the WebGate website. It doesn't, because there's, depending on which option you want to use, whether it's designer interface, the reports, which are the two most common one that as designers that we'll use. Designer interface, taking us to that WebGate website, allows us to select which one we want to get into, and then we have to log into each one of those sites. Trnsport Quantities, this opens up the FDOT application that basically when you're in designer interface, it's a WebGate reporting. When I get my summary of pay items report, and that might be for the summary of quantities or it might be the proposal. Either way, that report, if you select the CADD option, you can bring that file or download that file and it gets saved as an XML file. This tool reads that XML file. It will automatically populate the county and the financial ID number, and then when I hit load pay items, then it creates my summary of pay item sheets as well as numbers them. Fills out all the information that goes into the sheets for us. And then the last option under Trnsport involved with the quantity workflow is the quantity rounder. This application was developed in the last year. Basically, it takes the XML file that you can export from Quantity Manager and it corrects the final accuracy per the basis of estimates, so that in other words, by default, because the basis of estimates directs us to, say if I have a linear foot item, that unit, linear foot, needs to be rounded to, the final quantity needs to be rounded to the nearest whole number. However, according to the basis of estimates, it needs to be, each individual quantity needs to be rounded to the next significant digit. So it would be rounded to the 10th. Then all the way through, even through Quantity Manager, that accuracy to the 10th is held. So before it goes into Trnsport, it needs to be rounded up to the correct whole number accuracy. And this is what Quantity Rounder does. It looks and finds what the unit is, and then it rounds the quantity for the pay item to the correct accuracy. And then we can upload it into Trnsport and all is good. Okay, the last thing that is on the menu is the quality control. And quality control is basically under Actions, go to Quality Control, and it opens up the FDOT quality control suite of tools. Batch report, quick check, or check, I should say, QC quick, stop, version, and legacy. Version just simply gives me the version of the file. QC stop, for the session, I can stop QC while I have for that microstation session. And a new tool that's out here is QC Legacy. And QC Legacy is basically a tool that you can use to check your files to see if there are elements within that file that have been retired. Basically, we no longer, for one reason or another, we've changed the level names and retired the old level names. Sometimes it's for consistency. Using that particular tool is a good way to double check an old file that you may be trying to reference or bring into your project to make sure it's all up to standards. And a lot of times what we've changed our levels to kind of makes sense. And also, if you haven't seen it yet, Mike Robertson in our office will be giving a webinar on these tools coming soon. So if you want more information, sign up for that webinar. And that's pretty much it. Hopefully, I've shown you something you weren't aware of that's out there on the actions menu to help you guys do your projects. If anyone needs help with any of those tools, you can contact anyone in our office. The contact information is on the screen. You can contact all of us in support at ECSO.support@dot.state.fl.us. Go to our website. From our website, we have training manuals as well as the posted webinars. Yes, this is being recorded and it will be posted out on our posted webinars webpage from our homepage. You can also go out to the CAD support forum online, and there's a link within MicroStation as well as the link provided here where you can go out and not just get us to help you from our office, but there's a really good group out there on that site that help each other. A lot of times they kind of get the answers out there before we even have a chance to respond, so it's a really good group. That being said, if you need any help, give us a call. Until then, I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day and a fantastic weekend, and we will talk to you guys next week.